to our MSP for Dunfermline, our Cabinet Secretary for Social Security and Older People, Shirley Ann Somerville, MSP.
Conference, I am delighted to address you today as the second Minister to have had responsibility for social security powers in Scotland. And I would like to begin by paying tribute to the previous Minister for Social Security, Jean Freeman, under the Cabinet Secretary, Angela Constance, for a fabulous work they both did to get the foundations right for social security. And I'd also like to pay tribute to the support and hard work of my most marvellous Minister for Older People and Equalities, Christina McKelvey. Since powers were devolved through the Scotland Act in early 2016, your SNP Scottish Government has done a power of work to establish a Scottish social security system. We've now introduced 6 benefits and are on track to deliver another 6 by the end of this parliamentary term, as well as additional payments for carers of more than one disabled child. In that same time, there have been 3 Prime Ministers and 7 Secretary of States for Work and Pensions. In fact, in my 18 months in this post, I've gone through 3 Secretaries of State already. Now, Conference, this doesn't just highlight the disarray within the Tory party. It highlights the disarray at the heart of their welfare system. Whilst we have chosen to build our system embedded in the principles of dignity, fairness and respect, they have chosen to dismantle a welfare state that was put in place in the post-war years alongside one of our other greatest public services, the NHS. So it is no wonder that Professor Philip Alston, the United Nations Poverty and Human Rights Rapporteur, speaking in Edinburgh just 2 weeks ago, said that Scotland is on a very different trajectory than England when it comes to the social protection of its population. And while the spirit of the welfare state is alive and humming, it is on the wane in the rest of the UK. This, he said in his report to the UN earlier this year, is causing a massive rise in poverty and of destitution. He called it not just a disgrace, but a social calamity and an economic disaster all rolled into one, which has led to tragic consequences. And those tragic consequences are not hard to find in communities the length and breadth of our country. The UK government welfare cuts are estimated to reduce spending on social security in Scotland by a massive £3.7 billion by next year. And the largest Tory welfare cuts are hitting children the most. Their decision to freeze benefits will cost Scots £300 million a year. And yet the Tories just keep on hammering. Changes to the work allowance in universal credit takes away another £100 million. And the removal of the first child premium and the 2-child cap on tax credits is another cut of another £100 million. There are appalling consequences to that cap on children. It is, of course, how they introduced the abhorrent rape clause. Conference, I struggle to even imagine how anyone can come up with such a shocking, degrading policy. But I struggle even more when Tory after Tory stands up in Holyrood and at Westminster and defends that policy every day. And this is just a snapshot of the harm that has been caused by the Tory government. A decade ago, no one had even heard of foot bags. Now it's an everyday phrase in every community. And it's a response from charities and from the public to an imposition of Tory austerity, to welfare cuts, to the chaotic, shambolic introduction of universal credit. A report from the Trussell Trust last month showed that the demand for food bank services had increased by 30% in areas where universal credit had been introduced for a year. It had increased by 39% after 18 months, and by 2 years, there was an increase of almost 50%. Now, there is a mountain of evidence out there that shows that universal credit is not working and what the fixes are that need to be put in place to make it work, starting with the minimum 5-week wait, which of course is many weeks longer for many. This leads immediately to financial hardship, and in the longer term, the evidence shows that, along with other flaws in the system, contributes to rent arrears and to debt. A poverty trap created by a callous Tory government, which in turn is creating a spiral of debt for households across Scotland. Now, they could end this misery. They could scrap the minimum 5-week wait. They could end the paying back of advance payments, which immediately put people into debt, just as they could restore the work allowance. They could do all of that, but they choose not to. That is their legacy on welfare. It will not be ours. Look at what we've already achieved. Look at what we've already achieved in that 18 months. The Social Security Scotland Act gave us the powers to start delivering powers here in Scotland. In that short time, we have already delivered so much. As well as the introduction of new benefits, we have established our experience panels so we can build our system with people with direct experience of the social security system. We've set up the Social Security Commission to independently review all our regulations. And we've published our Social Security Charter so that people know their rights when it comes to benefits. And we now have, just down the road in Dundee, the headquarters for Scotland's newest public service, Social Security Scotland, which has delivered £190 million worth of benefits to 91,000 households in its first few months and is set to deliver £335 million this financial year. Now, these, of course, are not just replacement benefits. Many are brand new benefits to support the people of Scotland. And by the time we've introduced our planned 16 benefits, 5 will be completely new. This includes our new Job Start payment, which will start next spring, a brand new benefit to help around 5,000 young people every year with the costs of starting a job, helping them to pay for transport, clothing, childcare, to support them into work after a period of unemployment. And we want carers to benefit from our new powers as well. That's why our very first act was to pay carers more. Through our Carers Allowance Supplement, carers here in Scotland will get £452.40 a year more than those out with Scotland. And we're going further. We want to support young carers between 16 and 18 who cannot get carers allowance. So we'll introduce a brand new benefit, a £300 grant, to help those young people who help their families. A clear example of what you can do with powers over social security. In conference, I'm absolutely delighted to be able to announce today that the applications for the Young Carers Grant will open next Monday. Our 3 Best Start grants have also been a great success. On the first day of the pregnancy payment being introduced, we had over 4,000 applications. And in the first 7 months of that programme, we've dealt with over 63,000 applications and paid out nearly £13 million of Best Start grant payments. A massive £11 million more than the UK government had paid out in the whole of the year before. And it's not just because our benefits provide more, which they do, or that it doesn't cap children, so second and subsequent children can also receive the benefit, because it does that too. But it's because we've actively went out and promoted it. We've removed the stigma. We've promoted the benefit to people, encouraged people to apply for it, and made it simple and easy for them to go through that application process. Because unlike the Tories, we believe the social security system should be there to support people to get what they're entitled to, rather than putting barriers in the way and belittling them in that process. And why do we do that? Well, it's very simple, because we know that this vital financial support will help children to get that best start in life. So from the 1st of April next year, we'll also be taking overall responsibility for disability benefits, including their funding. We'll start next year with the disability payments to young people, before moving on to those of working age people in early 2021, and then to older people. These benefits will be different from everything that we've delivered so far. There will need to be much more support, from application to assessment to appeals. The frameworks and infrastructure will need to be put in place to ensure that we are there to support people, and they need to be in place to ensure that that's there right from day one. And we're working hard to do just that. Conference, I've heard in this job far too many people talk about the fear of applying for welfare support. They only talk of stigma, of stress, anxiety. They talk about an inhumane system that's degrading for them to go through. They've told me about the dread of that brown envelope coming through the door from the DWP. We can, we must, and we will do things very differently here in Scotland. So we've already committed to a significant reduction in the number of face-to-face assessments needed when it comes to disability assistance. And when such assessments are necessary, they will be carried out by Social Security Scotland at a time and location that suits that person. We will never use private sector providers like Atos to deliver disability assessments. There is no place. There is absolutely no place for profits in the newest of your public services here in Scotland. Now, we believe that social security is an investment in our people. It tackles inequalities, it tackles poverty, and we'll soon be administering those 16 benefits that will support over 500,000 people. And I want people to know and to be encouraged to take up the financial support that they are entitled to. Now, I know many groups provide valuable support to thousands of people when it comes to accessing benefits. That is why, at conference, I'm delighted to announce that I'll be making £500,000 available to organisations who support people to access their benefits. This Scottish Benefit Take-Up Fund will help charities and the third sector organisations prepare for our new benefits coming. I want them to be equipped to provide information and to promote the take-up of the benefits, whether it's training staff, getting information ready, or delivering promotional materials. We want organisations to be supported so that they can support the people of Scotland. So our social security system will always be rooted in dignity, fairness, and respect. And this really does sum up the difference between your SNP government and the Tories at Westminster. The Tories are a disaster when it comes to welfare, but they're a disaster when it comes to Brexit too. We have a Prime Minister who's lost every significant vote in his premiership, who illegally prorogued Parliament, who ignores a democratic Parliament, and looks increasingly likely that he might ignore the law by ignoring the Benn Act. Anyone else would lose their job, and he doesn't even apologise to people for it. Now, if being dragged out of the EU against our will is a nightmare, then being dragged out under a no deal is a night terror. That damage could be just a fortnight away, conference, and it is all of Scotland that will be hit, rural and urban. The Yellowhammer papers laid bare what we could be facing, and it's those on the lowest incomes who will be hit the hardest. Fuel and food prices could see large increases, just where those on low-income families spend the greatest proportion of their salaries. Scottish Government analysis has shown that 130,000 people in Scotland could be pushed into poverty by a no-deal exit. That's why my colleague Aileen Campbell has urged the UK Government to take action to protect people on low incomes through launching an immediate benefit awareness and take-up campaign, removing the benefit cap, lifting the benefit freeze, and increasing benefits. They need to make immediate changes to universal credit, including reduction of the waiting time for payments and providing a grant, not a hardship payment in that time. The Tories simply cannot push the country over the cliff edge to a no-deal Brexit, while at the same time putting absolutely nothing in place to protect the poorest and the most vulnerable in our society just because of their reckless ideology. They say they want to get a deal done, but they take no action to get one. Just like they say they want to tackle poverty, and yet they take no action on that either. Conference, you know that we only have 16% of social security spending being devolved here to Scotland. We don't have all the powers we need to fully tackle poverty and inequality, but where we do, we will use them in housing, childcare, energy efficiency, education, and in social security. Last year, your SNP Scottish Government invested £1.4 billion in low-income households, and that's over and above the universal services such as the NHS in our schools. This includes around £100 million that we spend every year to mitigate the worst effects of the Tory welfare cuts. That's funds that we could be investing in our ambitious targets to tackle and end child poverty, because we want Scotland to be the best place for a child to grow up. That's why we're introducing radical and bold moves through the Scottish Child Payment to tackle child poverty head-on. Described by poverty campaigners themselves as a game changer, this new payment will be introduced in 2022 for all under-16s in low-income households, in line with our commitment in the Tackling Child Poverty Delivery Plan. And I can confirm that under-6s will start be paying this benefit early, worth £10 a week by next Christmas. And I want to be absolutely clear. There will be no cap on the number of children for this payment or any other social security payment in Scotland. So over a third of Scottish children will be eligible for this payment when fully rolled out, and early introduction means 140,000 households with 170,000 children will benefit from this early investment. The Scottish Child Payment has the potential to lift 30,000 children out of relative poverty and increase the incomes of tens of thousands more families. So when the Tories double down on a no-deal Brexit and they risk the jobs and the incomes of thousands of families across Scotland, we'll get on with the job of tackling poverty, tackling inequality, and supporting people every step of the way. Conference, I've spoken today about two social security systems. The Tories, built on stigma and fear, and ours, based on dignity, fairness, and respect. And in many ways, how you run your social security system is a demonstration about the type of country you want to be, that you want to live in. Dignity, fairness, and respect, they talk to the values of why I joined this party some time ago, and about why we all continue to work so hard to improve the lives of the people of Scotland, and it's embedded in what your government delivers day in, day out. We have done much in 1 year, and there is rightly so much that we can be proud of. With the limited powers we have, I truly believe that we are already making a real difference to people right across Scotland, in every community. But we could do more, so much more. Our work is not limited by our ambition or our determination, but the lack of powers that we have to get on with the job at hand. And Conference, you know as well as I that those powers will only come with independence. Thank you.
What a great start to our day conference. Let's move on now to resolution number 18, Dungavel Centre, to be moved by Linda Fabiani, MSP, and seconded by Bill Ward. Welcome, Linda.
Good morning, Conference. Dungavel Immigration Removal Centre is a little part of Scotland over which we have absolutely no say, absolutely no control, absolutely no right to information. For those of you who perhaps are not aware of it, it started out as Dungavel Detention Centre in 2001, and it's a former open prison. And let me tell you, since the UK Home Office took it over, it has barbed wire and gates way beyond anything that was ever there when it was an actual prison. And this is to hold people who, in the majority of cases, have done no more than flee oppression or try to make a better life for themselves and their families. We've been talking about Dungavel Detention Centre, now Immigration Removal Centre, for many years and many times at this conference, largely because we think there's absolutely no place in Scotland for a facility such as this. And other times, because some of the practices that go out on there, we have found abhorrent. Now, that's not to say that there aren't well-intentioned and very good members of staff, etc. at Dungavel. It's largely local people, many of whom do their absolute best. But the very idea of locking people up for absolutely nothing when there are so many good alternatives that can be taken. And it really sticks in my craw the fact that we have absolutely no say over any of it whatsoever. Now, back in 2010, you may remember we had a Tory Lib Dem coalition government in Westminster. And one of the first things that the Lib Dems announced was that they were going to stop the detention of children. They haven't. We found out fairly recently, after much investigation, much lobbying, we found out through a Freedom of Information request that, in fact, there were, by reports from the Home Office itself, I think it was 19 people under 18 who had lately been detained in Dungavel. We also were told that there had been 6 pregnant women detained at Dungavel. Now, I remember some years ago an outrage I think we brought to this conference at the time as well, that, do you know, there was a pregnant woman at Dungavel who went into labour and was taken to Hare Myers Hospital and handcuffed to the bedpost while she delivered. These years ago. You should not be holding pregnant women in a detention centre. Anyway. So I wrote to the Home Office after that we got this Freedom of Information stuff. And they've written back to me to say, and I'm going to quote it, the government met its 2010 commitment to end the routine detention of children for immigration purposes by fundamentally changing the system to ensure that the welfare of the child is at the heart of every decision it makes. No, you didn't. That's rubbish. They also said in the letter that actually they made some mistakes and the figures they're given us weren't quite right and these people were probably not under 18 at all. Well, do you know what? I don't trust anything that comes out the mouths of these people. And I think it's absolutely shameful of the Liberal Democrat Party to have paraded about like that and now be burying their heads in the sand about how ineffective they were when they trumpeted themselves as being in partnership with government in the UK. So let's not have any more of them here. So it's time for true commitment on this. And I would just like to say a wee bit about the amendment that's been put forward from Glasgow Proven Branch. I totally agree with the spirit of this amendment. Of course, it's ridiculous that we have detention centres at all, and that we have a detention system as operated. Because the UK is, in fact, the only country in the EU which has no cap on the length of time that somebody can be detained under these powers. So I go along with the spirit of this. I'm just a wee bit worried about the breadth of what's said here, where it says to dismantle the immigration detention system in its entirety. I don't think there's been enough looked at there for us to be able to say that, because you know what? There may well be some baddies amongst people that immigrate here, and let's not pretend otherwise. So that's a very different amendment from saying stop the detention centres and the kind of detention we're talking about. The spirit's good. I think it's a bit too broad. So I would like you to pass the motion and also let us keep digging at this, keep looking at it, keep holding these people to account until we get the control over our own systems, which we can make an awful lot fairer. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. To second the resolution, we have Bill Ward, followed by Anne McLaughlin to move the amendment.
Good morning, Conference. That came a wee bit of a shock. I wasn't expected to second this resolution. I was actually intending to speak for the amendment, but I'm quite happy to do so anyway. I think there's a classic example of media spin that you often see when asylum seekers or even refugees are referred to as migrants, because that suggests that it's a lifestyle choice. So even people that are risking their lives and the lives of their children to escape war zones are referred to as migrants, as if they're making a lifestyle choice. Now, there was widespread condemnation in the press where it was revealed that Donald Trump was separating the children of migrants and locking them up. But the fact is, Theresa May was doing this at least 10 years earlier. And I remember my friend Anne McLaughlin making a petition on behalf of 2 of the victims of this outrage. And that was a paper petition, by the way, none of this newfangled e-petition nonsense. And I wrote at that time to the Home Secretary asking the question, why are the children of asylum seekers being treated as criminals? And I sent it off addressed to the Right Honourable Theresa May, Secretary of State at Her Majesty's Home Office, London, England. And to my surprise, I got a fairly prompt reply. And I opened it up with trepidation, and in it I discovered I was being sent an application form for asylum. And I was sorely tempted to fill it in and send it to Holyrood. Please support this resolution and the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Now to formally move the amendment, we have Anne McLaughlin, and to second the amendment, Lorna Flynn.
Morning. This is telling me I've only got a minute left. Okay, conference. I want to thank our MSPs. I want to thank Linda for bringing this resolution forward to conference, and to you, the members, for voting for it to be included on the agenda. And you'll get nothing but agreement from me in the spirit of this resolution. But we can't let the opportunity pass to have a clear and purposeful discussion about the wider issues around immigration detention. As an MP in 2017, I held a debate in my name on this very issue, and I worked with some of the great campaign groups across Scotland, keeping this issue alive. And what struck me most was the scale of it. Even for active, politically engaged people like ourselves, it's easy to forget that there are thousands of people who are tucked away in detention centres, out of the sight of the media, out of the sight of the public. Do you know that the UK government detains 28,000 people every year? Many of these people are people who somewhere down the line, it turns out, should never have been detained. Vulnerable people suffering from poor mental health. The UK is the only set of countries in the EU that detains without a time limit, so people have no idea when they'll be allowed to come out. Remember, these people have committed no crime. And evidence shows that there's actually no need to detain people anyway. Actual evidence from other countries and a pilot scheme down south said that very few people do abscond. Because think about it, where would they go? Who would help them? How would they survive? The much more humane solutions actually do work, so why are we not adopting them? 6 weeks ago, a second man in 12 months lost his life at a particular detention centre in England. Reports emerged that Oscar Okwurimi requested medical assistance before his death, but he was denied it. Even more sinister is that witnesses to his death were removed from the country before providing evidence, and by the time the High Court had intervened, they had already boarded a plane. That conference is a disgusting abdication of that man's right to justice. I won't go into much detail, but I well remember a child I was involved with telling his mum that it would be better if they could find a way to die. He was 10 years old. These places, conference, are soul-destroying, and they are destroying human beings who are only there because they fled something worse. The UK government claim it's only when there's a realistic chance of removal within a reasonable timescale that people will be detained, but that's rubbish. There are people in these places for months and even years. Conference, if you're not convinced by the moral arguments against detention, think of the economic ones. It costs a lot of money to treat vulnerable people this badly. And I made this point in my debate at Westminster to the then Immigration Minister. Detention has been proven to be the most expensive and the least effective of all the options at our disposal. And I thought, if I couldn't appeal to the UK government's humanity, I could at least appeal to their love of austerity. But no, not interested. It seems money is no object when it comes to incarcerating vulnerable people in the UK. So detention, as well as being expensive, ineffective and cruel, is simply ideologically driven. Just very quickly to answer Linda's point, however we've worded it, we're not suggesting nobody is ever detained ever, but the baddies will be in jail because they'll have committed crimes. I'm suggesting that there are much more humane ways to keep people before if they have to be deported. So please support the amendment.
Thank you, Anne. To second the amendment, we now have Lorna Finn. Welcome, Lorna.
Good morning, Conference. I won't speak for long. I just want to second the amendment, as this is something that I feel really strongly about, and I'm sure you do too. The fact that the Scottish Government has banned it, said not in our name, and yet this still happens. Why do we stand for this? I am a mother. My child is 9 years old, and the thought of her being detained, it is unspeakable, unthinkable. These people have fled from unimaginable horror, and I don't want to live in a country that supports this practice, yet it happens on our doorstep. The UK government, so fond of austerity, can't find money to help the most vulnerable people in society, yet an obscene amount of money is being spent to cruelly hurt and harm people who have already suffered more than most of us will endure in a lifetime. Conference, I urge you to support the resolution and our amendment. This is no way to treat people, and I, for one, want no part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorna. Our final speaker on this resolution, speaking in favour of the amendment, is Marianne Mawiki. Welcome, Marianne. Delegates, Marianne is a first-time speaker.
First of all, I'd like to give thanks to the Scottish Government for supporting immigrants throughout the years. conference, no one decided to leave and run away from their origin country for no good reasons. And a failed asylum seeker failed because they claim the rules that immigration puts are very hard. It's not easy to meet. Some of them, they fail because they cannot express themselves. It's not their fault. It's the fault of their government, where they come from. Delegates, please support this amendment, even if it takes for the UK government to reduce the foreign aid to any country which produce more asylum seekers. That we make the leaders overseas to be accountable and fulfill the human right obligation and respect the rights and beliefs and opinions of others and promote peace among the citizens. Detain and deport a mother or a child, a father or a sister, a brother is not a good thing. It affects really bad the mental health of all age. So please support the amendment. Thanks.
Thank you, Marianne. Delegates, we now move to the summing up on this resolution. Can I ask if Anne and Linda wish to sum up or if they wish to waive their right to sum up? Linda is coming up to sum up. Welcome, Linda. Oh. And Anne, okay. In which case, can we have Anne first, followed by Linda?
If the amendment is worded in such a way that it sounds like we're saying don't ever do anything if somebody genuinely does need to be removed from the country, then I'm sure there's precedent before that can be taken not to mean that. We certainly don't mean that, but what we do mean is that it's cruel. We all agree that it's an absolutely cruel way to expect people to live their lives. If somebody has committed a crime in this country, wherever they are from, they should go through the justice system and they should go to prison if it's a sufficient crime. These are not prisons. They are like prisons, but they're just detention centres. If somebody has done something wrong, then fine, but we're talking about vulnerable people, the vast majority of them, many of them with mental health problems. As we've heard, women, mothers, parents of children themselves. It's inhumane, and there are so many more examples throughout the world of the way that they can do it better and more humanely. I could give you a dozen examples if Kirsten would only give me the time to tell you about them all. And that's all we're calling for, is looking at a much more humane way of doing it that doesn't incarcerate people in these vile places. So please support the amendment.
Thank you, Anne. And to sum up for the resolution, Linda Fabiani, MSP.
Conference, this party has been seriously looking at much more humane ways to do these things for years now. And we'll carry on doing that. As I said earlier, I think the spirit of this amendment is absolutely right. I'm just worried about what it does here too. Let's look at the motion first of all. We have the proof that the promises made in 2010 have not been kept. We got the information through Freedom of Information that children and pregnant women are still being held at Dungavel. That's not good enough. Therefore, the last paragraph of our resolution says, Conference calls on the UK Government to urgently stop detaining children and pregnant women at Dungavel, a facility entirely unsuitable for people in such a vulnerable position. The amendment removes that paragraph. The amendment removes that paragraph and replaces it, removes the focus of what we are trying to hold them to account for something very, very detailed. That does not stop the rest of the good work that everyone in this party is doing to change the immigration and asylum system to something fairer. I would ask Conference, focus, support this resolution in its entirety. No omissions. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Conference will now move on to voting on this resolution. We'll vote firstly on the amendment and then on the resolution itself. So, delegates, in relation to the amendment, all those in favour of the amendment, please raise your cards now. Thank you. Cards down. All those against the amendment, please raise your cards now. Thank you. Cards down. The amendment falls substantially. Delegates, we now move on to voting on the resolution. Can I ask all those in favour of the resolution to please raise your cards? Thank you. Cards down. All those against the resolution, please raise your cards. Delegates, the resolution passes unanimously. Thank you. We now move on to Resolution 19 on Urban Green Deal, to be proposed by Fulton McGregor MSP and seconded by Rona Mackay MSP. Welcome, Fulton.
Good morning, Conference. It's safe to say that the issue of climate change has received unprecedented attention in recent months, and it's right that this SNP government has radical measures to tackle it at the centre of the programme for government. Conference, as a dad of 2 young kids myself, I have to say that I'm worried about the planet that we are leaving for their generation and for all those who come after. We know that there is a strong link between climate change and biodiversity loss, and that policies that seek to address this are invaluable in combating climate change. This is something that every individual nation and government can and should put forward measures to improve. Conference, the Urban Green Deal is one of these such measures and seeks to address biodiversity loss by increasing the amount of green space in our urban areas. Importantly, the deal also commits to prioritising more disadvantaged areas in the country to help bring about the well-documented health and economic benefits. In looking to roll out this Green Deal, the SNP believes that communities themselves are best placed to take the necessary action. This is simply because local communities will have a greater knowledge of their own demographics and their own needs. That's why this motion calls on the Scottish Government to work with public agencies and local authorities to make the Urban Green Deal work for our communities the length and breadth of Scotland. The SNP government will maintain its capital funding to help transform the social, economic and environmental outlook for communities for the rest of this parliamentary session, and I hope well beyond. This will be achieved through a number of measures, including the Regeneration Capital Fund, Clyde Gateway, the Scottish Partnership for Regeneration and Urban Centres Fund, and the Green Infrastructure Strategic Intervention led by Scottish Natural Heritage. This is in addition to providing funding to Community Land Scotland, paving the way for local communities to take back ownership of their land. Conference, the Urban Green Deal seeks to put disadvantaged areas first because evidence strongly indicates that improving access to green space and increasing people's use of outdoors is beneficial on a number of levels, including reducing health inequalities, reducing crime and antisocial behaviour, increasing happiness and community well-being, and boosting the local economy. The Central Scotland Green Network is one example of how this policy is being developed in an urban environment, and I fully believe that improving green space will be a pull factor for many urban areas, such as my constituency of Coatbridge and Chryson, attracting jobs and investment and resulting in a higher quality of living. I hope that local authorities and others can understand and see that increasing green space also increases both physical and mental health for those living in the area. For example, just a few months ago I lodged a motion in the Parliament celebrating Glenboig, a small village to the north of Coatbridge in my constituency with ample green space, as the 5th healthiest place to live in the UK. As an old coal mining town with areas of deprivation, this demonstrates fully the importance of having access to green space. In Conference, I'm here in front of you today as a representative of a constituency with a number of disadvantaged areas. It wouldn't be right if I didn't make a shameless plug and point out that the area along the Old Monkland Canal in central Coatbridge is crying out for regeneration, such as envisaged by this policy. I have taken this issue forward and I'm working with representatives, including Councillor Tracy Carragher and other stakeholders, to devise a strategy, and I'm hopeful that the principles of the Urban Green Deal will help deliver this for Coatbridge. Cleaning up and greening the canal area with trees, hedgerows and planting for pollinators would enhance biodiversity, make the area attractive for local people, and could help tackle the pollution from emissions in the nearby Wifley area of Coatbridge, one of the most polluted areas in Lanarkshire and indeed Scotland. Conference, the Urban Green Deal would be another SNP policy that helps tackle climate change and betters our communities. By investing in transforming parts of our urban build into green space, we can improve the environment, improve the economy, improve people's quality of life, further improving Scotland's reputation as an attractive and healthy place to live and work. Conference, please support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Fulton. To second the resolution, Rona Mackay, MSP, followed by Mary Goujon, MSP, to speak in favour. And delegates, if you are thinking you will be called to speak, it would be really helpful if you could make your way to the side of the stage so that we can move forward as smoothly as possible. Welcome, Rona.
Thank you. Good morning, Conference. This is a very important resolution and I urge you to support it. As the MSP for Strathkelvin and Bearsden, I'm very fortunate in my constituency to have fantastic woodland parks and green space in almost every town and village. But of course we know other areas in Scotland are not so fortunate, and that's why backing this resolution on the Urban Green Deal is so important. Because it's often people in the most disadvantaged communities and areas that have the least access to green space, and that's simply unacceptable. We know the benefits of living in a good environment and what that means for physical and mental well-being. Everyone has the right to a good quality of life, and by transforming local areas of deprivation, we can deliver that. There are far too many derelict areas near areas of deprivation which could be put to good use for the community. They're an eyesore, unnecessary, and a blight in the landscape that does no one any good. Our European neighbours, particularly Scandinavia, are leading the way on urban planning and show just what can be done with some joined-up thinking. The Scottish Government and COSLA have adopted the place principle to encourage collaboration and community development and driving inclusive growth with people who know what will work best for them locally. That could be playgrounds, allotments, trees, hedges, ponds, woodland, a whole host of things to enhance quality of life for those who live there. Developers and planners must increase the amount of good quality green space in towns and cities. Let's put an end to builders cramming in too many houses and too little space for profit, ignoring the values of green space and landscaping, which many affluent areas take for granted. Conference, we're experiencing a climate emergency, and we know that the causes of climate change and loss of biodiversity are linked. We need more trees, hedges and green space to help our environment at this critical time. The Scottish Government are developing links with many organisations aimed at improving our environment and encouraging social inclusion. Too many to mention in this short time, but this Green Deal is an integral part of this plan. So let's support this resolution to improve life for people in Scotland's towns and cities. Quality of life for everyone and helping the environment shouldn't be optional, it should be mandatory, no matter where you live in this wonderful country. Thank you.
Thank you, Rona. The final speaker we are able to take for this resolution is Mary Goujon, MSP. Welcome, Mary.
Good morning, everyone. It's an absolute privilege and my absolute pleasure to speak in support of this resolution today. Because as Minister for Rural Affairs and the Natural Environment, I have a very wide-ranging role, and one of the key areas and parts of that is looking after our wildlife and our plants. And getting to know my portfolio responsibilities over this past wee while, I've probably learned more Latin in the past 2 years than I ever thought would be possible. But it's also given me the chance to visit some of the fantastic projects that are happening in communities the length and breadth of Scotland. Like the community garden that I visited at North Edinburgh Arts Centre, which is in one of the most deprived parts of the city.
Now, it involves residents of all ages getting involved in creating a space for nature in their backyard, learning skills, growing food for their community, and all while having fun. So these are simple things, but they are so effective. Now, through its support for these kind of projects, the SNP and government already recognises how important green space in urban areas is. It's why we have a community growing fund and why we continue to support the fantastic work that's done by the Central Scotland Green Network. Now, the Central Scotland Green Network is Europe's largest green space project, and the area that it covers is home to 3.6 million people, including 86% of Scotland's severely deprived areas. Now, the CSGN aims to improve quality of life by transforming local areas. Its focus is on the remediation of derelict land, action in disadvantaged communities, and active travel. It worked with the local community and North Lanarkshire Council to create the Wishaw Hill wood pump track for BMX and mountain bikes and skateboards on vacant and derelict land. And since it opened in 2018, it's hosted a race in UK pump track championships. But there's also the wider impacts of that as well. The police have reported a dramatic reduction in antisocial activity associated with that site. Scottish fire and rescue call-outs have been minimised, which is saving in the order of £2,000 per incident. And the adjacent golf club has also reported a drop-off in vandalism on their course. Improving local green space is good for people and it's good for nature. The Scottish Government already has a pollinator strategy in place, and we're working with the transport industry, planning and local authorities to strongly encourage pollinator-friendly management policies. So basically what that means is we do less cutting and more planting of all the things that are good for our bees, for our hoverflies, for moths, butterflies, and all the other helpful little flying beasties. Now, a lot of local authorities have already changed their practice. Falkirk Council is planting more roundabouts with nectar-rich flowers. Argyll and Bute has reduced roadside verge management so that cutting takes place at more appropriate times. And others are looking at where to site wildflower verges to create those important corridors. But there is obviously more we can do and more that we should do. We're already meeting domestic and European air quality targets across much of Scotland, and we've set more stringent targets here in Scotland than the rest of the UK. But we should ensure that nature can play its part to address the pockets of poorer air quality in some urban areas, and especially in those areas where children go to school and where people live. Research out yesterday shows the scale of the challenge in cities like Edinburgh, where space is at a premium and people rightly are trying to improve their living space. But we need to look at what we can do to reverse the current trend of turning green space into built space. Urban green space is vital to our climate change ambitions. We all need to plant more trees and hedges where we can, but it's also key to improving people's health. There have been a range of reviews recently, including by the World Health Organization, which show that urban green space helps to improve mental health and reduce stress. It also improves people's immune systems and reduces inflammatory-based diseases, and even reduces overall mortality rates. Quite frankly, there is no downside from planting and maintaining more trees and pollinator-friendly plants in our cities and towns. So confidence, support the resolution, and I will take forward our party's commitment to create an urban Green Deal for the benefit of us all into government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Conference, we did have a number of cards in from other people who had hoped to speak on this resolution, and I'm sorry that we don't have time to hear from them all. However, given that there are no cards in against, I wonder if Fulton wishes to waive his right to sum up. He does, thank you. And given that there are no cards in against, Conference, is this resolution passed by acclaim? Thank you, delegates. We move on now to resolution number 20, abolition of graduation fees, to be proposed by Abby Hastings and seconded by Julia Stakurska. Welcome, Abby.
Friends,
As someone who's only grown up only knowing the experience of a devolved Scottish Parliament, I am thankful for the work that Holyrood has done to ensure that access to education, higher education, is free. I can say that for myself, the route to higher university education would be far less likely if it were not for the scrapping of tuition fees. This is a feeling that is replicated around all of Scotland's universities. However, the fight for truly free higher education is not yet won, and while graduation fees exist, the cost to graduate is too much for some students from disadvantaged economic backgrounds, and they are being further exploited by universities. For students, graduation is often the highlight of the academic year, if not their academic life. The fact that some students are paying up to £225 to simply attend their graduation is a slap in the face. £225 is over 1 month's Students' Awards Agency for Scotland's highest bracket bursary. Graduation should not be a privilege. Graduation should not come with a price tag. At some universities, if the students cannot even attend their graduation, they are still expected to pay the fee. This is an outrage. The time of graduation should be a celebration of the hard work, dedication, and often sweat and tears that a student pours into their degree. This should not be overshadowed by the demands of more payments that some students cannot afford. The notion of graduation fees does not fit in with our notion of progressive education. Our First Minister has stated that under the SNP, education will always be free. Under the SNP, record numbers of students from deprived areas are now studying at our universities, and we cannot afford to let them down at the final hurdle of graduation. We welcome the ongoing news that under the SNP, we are continuing to widen access with increased support for students from care experience backgrounds. This recognises our belief that Scottish education should be based on the ability to learn and not the ability to pay. We believe that this is a reasonable and necessary motion. The higher education sector is taking notice. Institutions such as the University of Glasgow, the University of Stirling and the University of Aberdeen, among others, have all abolished these graduation fees. We must take the final step and have the Scottish Government ensure that this is not a lottery and that the barrier is removed for all students. I call on you to support this motion to get us in line with the rest of our education policies. The right to education should not be determined by economic background, and the right to graduation should not be a privilege determined by wealth. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, Abby. To second the resolution, please welcome Julia Stakurska, to be followed by Alistair Allen, MSP.
Hi Conference. Firstly, I would like to congratulate NUS Scotland for leading their Free to Graduate campaign. The campaign is well and truly en route to changing lives of those in hardship. Conference, as Abby has outlined, while not all Scottish universities charge graduation fees, many do levy charges, on top of going higher to cover things like a graduation certificate, a programme of days events and membership to an alumni society. Graduations are the highlight of an academic year, eagerly anticipated by graduates, their families and friends, as well by staff in academic departments in schools and professional services. A Freedom of Information request by the National Union of Students showed some students were paying up to £255 to graduate. Now let's be honest, Conference, students are skint. Some more than others, but we are all skint. Unnecessary graduation fees are a financial burden for students, but it hits hard for folks from disadvantaged backgrounds, parents, single parents and those not in employment. It shouldn't cost us money to walk down a hall with a gown and get a certificate that we worked so hard for 4 years. I've just started my second year studying politics, sociology and social policy at the University of the West of Scotland. Right now, UWS still charges to graduate. The NUS says that UWS should scrap the charges because it has a relatively large number of students from disadvantaged backgrounds. The Paisley-based institution, of course, says that it has set up a fund to help students who might find the cost a burden and is looking for future options. Aberdeen, Strathclyde, Robert Gordon and Stirling have stopped burdensome graduation fees. UWS and the 10 others should do the same. It is concerned that graduation charges may be a particular difficulty for students from disadvantaged areas. They may be less likely to be able to borrow money from their families if they can't make the costs personally. Graduation fees are just unfair and should be scrapped immediately. So, Conference, please back this motion.
Thank you, Julia. The final speaker we're able to take is Alistair Allen, MSP, in favour of the resolution. Welcome, Alistair.
Conference, graduation from university is a well-deserved chance for students to celebrate, sing Gaudeamus and thank long-suffering parents by posing for photographs. My own recollection of graduation is that being at the start of the alphabet, I had the awesome responsibility of walking in the right direction at the right time during the ceremony, and I hope that all of those who followed me did not misplace their trust. But we shouldn't forget that graduation is not just a ceremony and that graduation fees, unless paid, mean that you don't get to go along. Indeed, according to my own memory, unless all library books are handed in at the time of graduation, you don't even get a degree. This last perhaps prompts a song that was still in circulation when I was a student in Glasgow, which goes, "As I was walking down the Byres Road, I met the clerk of Senate. Says he to me, 'You've nae degree.' Says I, 'Fine weel I ken it.'" It doesn't necessarily follow that students who reach the end of their degree course have the cash in hand to pay for a graduation fee. Indeed, it's highly likely that many don't. They have just had to get through a stressful exam period in which they will have had to cut down on the hours they do of paid work, if they do paid work. They are probably also busy looking for both accommodation and for a full-time job. And for students who don't have the benefit of parents who can help them out or who have the responsibility of children of their own, the situation is a lot more acute. Glasgow University and some others have happily taken a lead in recognising all of those things by abolishing their own graduation fees recently, as we've heard. And the fact that the numbers graduating in person from Glasgow has, I understand, gone up sharply since they did, seems to indicate that there was a problem that needed fixing. So now it's time for all of Scotland's higher education institutions to do likewise, and congratulations to the FSN for bringing this matter to conference. Please support the resolution.
Thank you, Alistair. Conference, we have no cards in against this resolution. Abby, can I ask if you're happy to waive your right to sum up? She is happy to do so. And as we have no cards in against the resolution, can I ask Conference, is the resolution passed by acclaim? Thank you very much, delegates. Delegates, we move on to resolution number 21, Universal Credit and Protected Date of Claim. The resolution to be moved by Bob Doris, MSP, and seconded by Councillor Alan Gow. Welcome, Bob.
Good morning, Conference, and I want to start by thanking welfare rights advisors right across Scotland for the commitment and professionalism they demonstrate every day of the week, helping some of our most vulnerable citizens. Their support is vital, as many become increasingly estranged and isolated from a distant and unresponsive UK social security regime. And I also actually want to thank local job centre staff and local DWP staff who often try to do their best for clients despite a deeply flawed system and an overstretched workforce. However, they all have to operate within a regime driven through by the discredited universal credit, with that wholly unacceptable minimum 5-week wait before people get the benefits they're entitled to. And that's also a regime that has presided over a 30% increase in the use of food banks as UC has been rolled out. And it's also a regime that's presided over spiralling rent arrears as UC has been rolled out also. Thank goodness, Conference, we have a Scottish Government and a Scottish social security system that just does things differently. Significantly, Scotland's social security system will not, unlike the UK of course, become a distant, impersonal, digital by default system. And that gets to the heart of the resolution before us this morning on protected date of claim. Put simply, protected date of claim secures benefit entitlement from the debate someone meets their welfare advisor for that first time to commence an application for universal credit, even if they can't submit it on that day. As Richard Gass from Glasgow City Council explained to the Scottish Parliament's Social Security Committee, there was a delivery partnership agreement with specific local authorities under an agency agreement with the DWP, and therefore, for any delays that might happen, we could not make a claim in that set period. The point of contact with ourselves was when they got their claim from. Mr Gass was clear that didn't exist for everyone and in every circumstance, but it did exist for Glasgow and it did exist for claimants within our city. However, on the 1st of April this year, all advisors lost their protected date of claims, and that was just absolutely unacceptable. In other words, those who could not fully complete and submit their application form on the day lost out on their rights. Glasgow City Council estimated that could impact up to 200 Glaswegians every single month. And remember, that's on top of the minimum 5-week wait also. The UK government have either taken the opportunity to end protected date of claim when they rolled out the Universal Credit's new help to claim system in partnership with Citizens Advice, or they simply didn't even know it existed in Glasgow. I'm actually not sure which. Now, when I contacted Derek Mitchell, CEO of Citizens Advice Scotland, here's what he had to say. He said, "We want the UK government to address these issues as soon as possible. We support the protected date of claim and have asked the Department for Work and Pensions to enable CAB to provide this help through help to claim." He said the DWP does allow limited examples of backdating, but most significantly, here's what he said: "I want to make clear that we would not have agreed to deliver the help to claim service if we believed that it would change the rules of people's entitlement to universal credit. CAB would not have signed up to it." And there seems to be real confusion at the nature of these protections. As convener of the Social Security Committee in the Scottish Parliament, I wrote to the then Secretary of State, Amber Rudd, on the matter. And Amber Rudd wrote back to me and she said, "Unfortunately, there's never been a legal basis for the process you describe, whereby a third party can protect the date of claim for universal credit." Well, I don't know what she means about no legal basis, because it was happening every day of the week in Glasgow. Real confusion at the heart of the UK government. Critically, though, Ms Rudd did inform me that there will be an evaluation of the help to claim process later this year. So I very much hope with that review, as Citizens Advice have also called for, that they introduce a clear and a consistent protected date of claim process, not only for those going to Citizens Advice, but for those going to local authorities, welfare advisors, the length and breadth of Scotland. It's just the right thing to do. Now, Conference, this might appear a fairly technical or dry issue, but it's not. It's about the most vulnerable people that we all represent, whose lives we want to change for the better, who are losing money because of a decision taken by the DWP and the UK government, and it can be fixed. I look forward to raising this matter constructively with the new Secretary of State, Theresa Coffey, in the days ahead. Of course, I look forward to all social security powers being in our Scottish Parliament, fully under the control But in the meantime, we just have to help the most vulnerable. Please support this resolution.
Thank you, Bob. Delegates to second this resolution, we have Councillor Alan Gow, to be followed by Ian McCubbin speaking in favour of the resolution. Welcome Alan, who's a first-time speaker at conference.
Thank you, Convener and delegates. I am here to second the motion. Let me begin by thanking Bob Doris MSP for his excellent remarks today and for his chairing and leadership of Holyrood's Social Security Committee. We are lucky to have Bob and Shirley Ann Somerville leading the setting up of our own social security service. And what a contrast in culture and approach between the Scottish and UK governments. Dignity, fairness and respect at the heart of ours. Budgets, bureaucracy and contempt at the heart of theirs. And let me give you a live example of this stark contrast happening right now. The hugely effective partnership between Glasgow City Council and Macmillan's Improving the Cancer Journey team, now to be replicated across Scotland thanks to our Scottish Government, had also helped NHS Greater Glasgow and the DWP to fast-track personal independence payments for patients who require treatment in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital's Specialised Spinal Injuries Unit. For 3 years, evidence from a consultant neurosurgeon was accepted by the DWP in Scotland as sufficient backing for a claim, reducing the need for patients to go through an assessment and reducing the PIP processing time from 30 weeks, yes, I said 30, down to 8. The DWP recently centralised the administration of PIP processing applications to England, and you know what's coming. They flatly refuse to recognise our partnership approach. Waiting times are back to over 30 weeks, effectively introducing bed blocking in a high-demand NHS unit with increased costs to the NHS of £86,000 per bed and substantial stress and financial worry for patients and families when they least need it. This is happening right now. Now, I have written to Therese Coffey, the new Secretary of State, and I await her response. It is, however, I think you will agree, an obvious example of a common-sense Scottish approach to helping those who need it, which should actually be replicated across the rest of the UK, not unpicked and undone under the guise of inefficiency. Delegates, we face many challenges in setting up our own system, but our values are the right ones, and I'm sure we can better anything from the UK Government. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Our final speaker in favour of the resolution is Ian McCubbin. Welcome, Ian.
Good morning, colleagues. I'm happy to support this motion. I think it's an excellent one. As long as we are a part of the UK, we must continue to challenge in every way the inhuman practices passed down by a far-right Tory government. That's not the words I want to use, but I'll leave it at that. The most vulnerable are disabled, mentally ill, physically and emotionally abused people, some of whom have already died from starvation and or committed suicide. Some young people and single mums are forced into organised crime to find money to live due to the universal credit sanctions. This other sanction is just a step too far. The ATOS link with DUP for assessment was also a very, very bad situation. In fact, I would say that this step is actually 2 steps too far. Many of the people this will affect are not able to counter this. An automatic advocacy scheme should be in place for the most vulnerable. This can be assessed by Citizens Advice Bureau and Council Welfare Services and an organisation which I represent, NASUWT Service of Benevolence, which I am one of them. So in essence, support this motion and empower where you can those advocates who can help the most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Conference, there are no cards in against this resolution. So can I ask delegates if the resolution is passed by acclaim? Thank you, delegates. We have a great session now to look forward to on Scotland's future. I'm delighted to welcome our panel to the platform, building up to an address from our Deputy Leader, Keith Brown, MSP, and I'm also delighted to welcome our compere for this session, John Nicholson. Welcome all.
Well, a very good, what is it? It's still morning. Very good morning to you, Conference. I'm John Nicholson, and welcome to our next session. It's a session on Scotland's future. We know that Scotland is at a crossroads, and important choices face us. A future in Boris Johnson's Brexit Britain, or as a prosperous, independent European country. Independence, as we all know, will be the catalyst to create a fairer and more prosperous society. Well, over the course of the next session, we have a variety of star speakers. Just look at them there, sitting, raring to go like coiled springs, each offering a unique and distinctive perspective. Talking of stars, to begin the session, we have Kate Forbes. Now, Kate is Minister, yep. How about that? Applause before she's even said a word. Kate is the Minister for Public Finance and the Digital Economy, selected as a member of the Scottish Parliament for Skye, Lochaber and Badenoch in 2016. Even more fans. I think I was Skye fans there, I could tell. Kate has an astonishingly varied background. She grew up in India, in Glasgow, and also in the Highlands. She has a background in the banking industry, and of course, as we all know, led that fantastic campaign to ban plastic straws. So a third round of applause for Kate Forbes.
Well, Mathin Va Conference. It's clear that we are living in very turbulent times, and the chaos that we are watching unfold is a symptom of the UK's broken political system. And the Westminster establishment is held in disdain by people the length and breadth of our nation. And that's why we are seeing a clear shift in support for independence, because the choice facing Scotland has never been so stark. Conference, it's no surprise to us that Westminster ignores Scotland, disregards our position and threatens our future, but more and more of our friends and colleagues are seeing it for themselves. Politics is moving at pace. There's no longer a status quo. We will never go back to the way it was. It's now time to think about how Scotland can go forward. And at Westminster, we have a hard-line government led by Boris Johnson, a Prime Minister who, in the short time he's been in office, has tried to shut down Parliament and threatened to break and ignore the law. Let's be in no doubt about this. This is a Tory government that is even worse than the government that preceded it. This is a government that's been shunned even by Theresa May's closest ministers. It's more extreme and it's more dangerous in every respect. Take one example, our people. Our people are our greatest asset. And yet this is a Tory government whose Home Secretary stood up at her own conference with glee and a grin on her face and talked about ending the free movement of people once and for all with enthusiasm. This is a Tory government who, shored up by the votes of Scottish Tory MPs, is so committed to appeasing the hard right that they will stop at nothing, no matter the economic damage, no matter the cost to living standards and public services, and no matter the 100,000 Scottish jobs that could be put at risk by their reckless approach. Conference, Scotland can do better than this. In fact, Scotland demands better than this. We demand better for our communities. We demand better for our children. And we demand better for our future. We stand at a crossroads, not just those of us who are here in this room, but the people of Scotland stand at a crossroads, and the stakes are high. We face a choice, and the question for everybody who lives and calls Scotland home is this: who will take Scotland forward? Will it be a government in Westminster that is pursuing a damaging, insular, radical, hard-right agenda that threatens jobs, prosperity and well-being? Or will it be our own government here in Scotland, a government which is doing all it can to build a better, more prosperous future for all of those living in our nation? And Conference, I don't want to talk about the Tories. I want to talk about hope. Here in Scotland, the Scottish Government is using the powers that we have to introduce policies that have fairness and well-being at their heart. We're focusing on continuing to build a successful and a fair economy which reduces inequality, which improves the quality of life and supports and benefits everybody in society. We are taking action on the things that matter. And we can list a whole host of examples, whether that's introducing world-leading action on climate change that's been applauded internationally, whether that's introducing a social security system that enshrines social security as a human right, that invests in our people and that contributes to reducing poverty. Whether that's introducing a Scottish National Investment Bank to invest in business and communities and achieve transformative and inclusive change. And more importantly than all of that, we are sending a clear message that people who choose to make their home in Scotland are welcome and we want them to stay. Friends, open, fair, progressive and prosperous, that is the kind of country that we want to be. Just imagine what more we could achieve as an independent country. And so, Conference, as Derek Mackay said so well yesterday, we cannot afford to be subject to the whim of Westminster for years and years to come. And so, while the Westminster government is pursuing an agenda that is increasingly isolationist and inward-looking, we are choosing a different path. We are looking outward and we are looking forward. We are looking to an internationalist future as an independent country. And as an independent nation within Europe, we're just joining a whole host of other small, successful European nations, because it comes down to this: independence is normal. Independence is about making Scotland's great wealth and great resources work better for everybody living in Scotland, now and for generations to come. With independence, we're simply asking for the right to choose our own future and to chart a course for generations, a future that we choose for our nation, not one that is imposed on us. And friends, I began by saying that in these turbulent times, Scotland stands at a crossroads. We and the rest of the people in Scotland are faced with an increasingly stark choice between two alternative visions for our nation's prospects. And it's up to us to ensure that Scotland and everybody in Scotland, whether they're sitting in this room or not, that everybody gets the opportunity to make that choice for a better future with hope and ambition. Thank you.
Kate Forbes, ladies and gentlemen, and I think all of us in this hall feel as passionately as Kate does about our European Union citizens being allowed to stay here and feeling that Scotland is their home. Well, nobody epitomises that more than our next speaker, Julia Stachurska. Anywhere close? That'll do, she says, which means that it was terrible. Julia is the chair of the SNP students, an EU national. Julia came to Scotland from Poland as a child and is proud to call Scotland her home. Now, like so many of our EU citizens, Julia is passionate about Scotland's place in Europe, vital for our young people and for their future. So a big round of applause, please, for Julia.
Thank you, John, for that introduction. That makes me feel really good. Thank you. Confidence, fairness, compassion and respect. That is what led me to join the SNP in early 2017. Sadly, being an EU citizen living in the UK often isn't easy in the current political climate. Brexit has embodied and empowered the far right, and the tone of conversation has changed. For years now, I have been one of the 225,000 EU nationals that has contributed to our economy and the social fabric of my community here in Scotland. Yet the Tories want me to apply to remain in my own home. How dare they? Conference, let's be frank, Westminster politics is to blame for allowing this vile anti-immigrant rhetoric to become so normalised in our society. But I'm proud of our party because I know that everyone in this room and all of our members, the length and breadth of Scotland, value and contribute EU citizens like myself. It's this ambition to create an accepting, forward-looking nation that drives me to campaign for independence and the reason that I'm here at our party conference today. Let's not forget, though, independence isn't about a victory for the SNP, or dare I say, a victory for the Yes movement. It's about our right to self-determination, our right to decide our own future. Because ultimately, the people of Scotland, without any doubt, are the best people to make decisions that affect us. Westminster may only be 500 miles down the road, but it's a world away when it comes to decision making. Conference, independence is the polar opposite of Brexit. Where Brexit wants to throw up borders and kick out all the immigrants, independence looks to knock down the walls and welcome people across the globe with open arms. Conference, this is the Scotland that I want to build, and the more I campaign and the more I hear from others who support our movement, the more I know this is a cause worth fighting for. I am absolutely honoured to be speaking to you today as we look to working towards making this vision a reality. Thank you so much.
Many thanks to Julia Stachurska. I've just had a quick Polish lesson here from Kirsten. So that was terrific. Now we're going to have the first speaker in this session who speaks English as a native language next, and that is Laura Mitchell. Now you will know Laura as a highly experienced local campaigner, and I think it's fair to say that Laura is not a fan of the Scottish Conservative Party, and obviously I'm restricted in exactly what I can say, but I can say this: she may soon be doing her bit to reduce their numbers at Westminster. So a great pleasure to welcome Laura to the stage.
Thank you. Conference, it would be remiss of me as a delegate from Murray to not take to the stage and mention that this incredible building that we are in today was built by Elgin's very own Robertson Group. What an incredible asset for the North East, and I hope you've enjoyed your time here. Delegates, in the last 2 years, the work of the SNP has never stopped. Here in the northeast of Scotland and across the rest of the country, we are ready. We have a chance to stand up against a hard-right Brexiteer government and seek the opportunity for Scotland to choose our own better future. The Scottish Tory MPs have shown that they will always put Boris Johnson's interests ahead of the interests of our local communities. Every single Tory MP in Scotland voted for a no-deal Brexit, despite the fact that their constituencies, every single one of them, voted to remain. Conference, how can they morally justify voting for no deal when they know it will mean food shortages, medicine shortages, and it will have a catastrophic impact on those with low incomes in their constituencies? Jobs will be lost and funding for our beloved NHS will be affected. How can they look their constituents in the eye? They have failed to stand up for their constituencies. They have failed to stand up for Scotland. Conference, their time is up. These Tory MPs have shown complete indifference to the real fears that people have around vital medicine, their jobs, and being able to feed their families. Instead, they are simply cheerleaders for Boris Johnson and his no-deal government. Conference, this must end. The SNP will always put our constituents first. We are out there every day speaking to people in our communities about the issues that affect them. I see firsthand every day the damage that Tories are causing in our local communities. We have the opportunity to bring about real change, to win Scottish seats back from the Tories, to stop Boris, to stop Brexit, and give Scotland a choice. And ensuring a choice in Scotland's future must be central to any forthcoming general election campaign. To have an election and to continue within the broken Westminster system which caused this damage in the first place will not suffice. There is no good Brexit. There is no good outcome, deal or no deal. We're fortunate in Scotland. When faced with an increasingly extreme and right-wing politics at Westminster, and the chaos of Brexit, we can offer the opportunity for Scotland to take a different path, a path to build a progressive, fair, more equal society, a path to an independent nation within Europe. In this election, we must offer Scotland that choice, a lifeline in the Brexit chaos, and a choice of a better future. Let's get to work, make it happen.
Thank you very much indeed, Laura. Our next speaker is the convener of Young Scots for Independence, Gavin Lundy. Now, it goes without saying that young people have the most to gain from independence as we seek to provide the best opportunities for future generations. So it's a pleasure to welcome Gavin to the stage.
Thank you, and may I take the chance to show my gratitude for the opportunity to address you all here today in the Granite City. As I stand before you today, we are a party with independence within our reach. As national convener of Young Scots for Independence, I often think about the role that young people will play in the decades that follow today. I think about where we are as a nation and where we are going together. And I think about the momentous implications of the fact that with work, with honesty, with the courage to stand by our convictions, my generation will be the first in centuries to live most of our lives in an independent Scotland. But we aren't there yet. I therefore invite you to join me in considering the historic times that we now live in. Scotland is a nation on a journey. A journey towards independence, of course, but even more importantly, to more ambitious horizons beyond that first step. When I was 2 years old, the Scottish Parliament met once again for the first time in 3 centuries. This was a moment of self-belief, a cultural epoch marked by the words that we carved into that very building. Today's young Scots are already the first generation to have always known a Scottish Parliament. This is a fact that we often forget. And for all of my teenage and my adult life, I've only ever known an SNP Scottish government. So this is something that I think would have been unthinkable. Of course. This would have been absolutely unthinkable for my parents' generation. So let us remind ourselves of that truth and be proud that having been in government for so long, we remain committed, we remain principled, and we remain on our toes. The SNP will never take the Scottish people for granted. The SNP has delivered for Scotland for over 12 years, and it's delivering for young people today. For over a decade, young people like me have benefited from the opportunity to go to university tuition-free, safe in the knowledge that with the SNP government, we will never have to pay to learn. Today, young people graduating or leaving secondary school and entering into their careers benefit from the fairest tax system anywhere in the UK, a system built of political choice, not of political convenience. It's a system that matches our aspirations as a party, and in my conviction, one that is in tune with who we are as a country. With Kevin Stewart's housing leadership, the SNP Scottish Government is quite literally building a new Scotland. Our party has built tens of thousands of affordable new homes across our country, and we are making the millennial objective of home ownership less of an impossibility. And on top of this, so much more. Yet we still have so far to go. The price of inequality is lost potential. When Jimmy Reid spoke of the bright windows and the high flats where dormant talent perished from a lack of opportunity, he was telling a story that we all recognise in many of our own sad ways. But it's a story that's changing. Our country is now undeniably the best place to grow up anywhere in the UK thanks to our Scottish Government. Yet equally undeniable is the grim reality that this work can never be finished without independence. But we are so close to achieving just that. But the road ahead is perilous. We face a no-deal Brexit in a matter of weeks, and Tory misrule with no end in sight. I wish I could stand here and tell you that there was a shortcut, an easy route to our goal, but there isn't. The prize is simply too valuable to be won without great effort. So let us reject the insecurity of reaction and fully embrace the dignity of a nation on its way to independence. Let's start how we mean to go on. Let's recognise that we will win by having millions of conversations with the Scots who have yet to be convinced by our arguments, by working harder as activists than we ever have before, and by bringing people along with us on our journey. Let's see that this journey is worth it in itself, and how we achieve our independence will affect exactly what that independent nation will look like. It'll be your voices on the doorsteps, in writing, in the press, on social media, everywhere, that will set the tone of the oldest newly independent nation in the world. Your words and your actions will echo through the generations that come before us, or come beyond us, those that are privileged enough to be part of this journey. How we act now will affect the message that we send to ourselves and to the world about who we are and in what ways we can be counted upon. So consider, what does independence mean to you? To what end does it serve? What constitution would you proclaim? And what founding myths would you embrace? And how would you turn those myths into reality? Independence has never been the end goal. It has always been the means to an end. That end must be built of higher ambitions than anything that Westminster could ever offer Scotland. So let's aim higher than Brexit. Let's aim higher than austerity. Aim higher than the status quo. And let's aim higher than the rat race. We are almost there. But to complete the journey to independence, we will have to heed the immortal words of Alistair Gray. Words that shine even brighter now than when they were first put to paper in the 80s, or when we put them on stone in our Parliament in 2004, or when we placed them across our hearts and then onto our sleeves in 2014. Work as if you live in the early days of a better nation. So let's win the campaign and build a beacon of fairness, of equality and of opportunity. An independent Scotland. A Scotland that future generations of young Scots will be proud to call home. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Gavin. Shona Robinson has been an SNP member of the Scottish Parliament since 1999, serving with distinction in various ministerial and cabinet roles. She has this week been appointed to a new role as convener of the Social Justice and Fairness Commission and will be working to build the case for independence, showing how, with full powers, Scotland can tackle poverty and create a fairer society. So let's give a big welcome to Shona Robinson.
Well, conference, you're all looking very good out there. I joined this party in 1988. I know you can hardly believe that, but it's true. And that's longer than many of you have been on this planet, particularly some of the fantastic speakers we've just heard from. And that makes me happy because we've got a great younger generation that have joined this party, and the party is in good hands. During that time, conference, I've served in many positions. I've had the honour of being a member of the Scottish Parliament for 20 years. I've been in government for 11 years, and now I have a bit of my life back. Now, these have all been great experiences, but having been asked by Nicola to chair the Social Justice and Fairness Commission is probably the most exciting opportunity of them all, and I was delighted to accept. So why is that? Well, conference, because it's what I joined the SNP for 31 years ago. It wasn't to take one flag down and put another flag up in its place. It was about what we could achieve with the powers of independence for our nation. And it's because I believe through independence that we can create that more socially just Scotland that we all seek, to tackle poverty, to offer hope to everyone who chooses to build their lives here. And I'm sure it's why you joined the SNP too. Sometimes, conference, and you may have felt like this yourself, you can get caught up in the minute details of policy debates, and those are all important. But you don't often get the opportunity to take a step back, to have the time to think about and work on the raison d'etre for joining the SNP, and that is what independence has the potential to deliver for our nation. And that is the opportunity that the Social Justice and Fairness Commission gives us. We have a wealth of talent and experience in the Commission. People like the former Chief Medical Officer, Sir Harry Burns. He is a fantastic guy. He brings a wealth of knowledge. He's got a great sense of humour. He's a guy, he cut his teeth in medicine and has been a surgeon in the East End of Glasgow. He knows what it's like and why we need things to change. He has a great experience of developing an evidence base of how we tackle health inequalities. So he's a fantastic asset to the Commission. We have academics, we have MPs, we have government ministers like Aileen Campbell, we have councillors, people with lived experience, people like Julia who are serving on the Commission. And that is great. But not all commissioners are members of the SNP, and that's important too, because we want to be inclusive. We want to build our nation of the talents, yes, within the SNP, but we also want to harness those talents beyond the SNP, and that's what the Commission will do. We have a tough task ahead of us. We have to deliver a route map to the prize of independence, building on the Scottish Government's fantastic commitment to a well-being economy, where we're focused on the well-being of our society as the performance of our economy, and where we judge our success not just by GDP, but by the health and well-being of our nation, how we can harness the resources of an independent Scotland and share them more fairly to secure better outcomes for our people. It will demonstrate how we can use the powers of independence to end poverty, achieve full employment and drive equality for all. It will set out key actions that we can take within the short, medium and long term to deliver social justice and fairness for all. Conference work has started. We had our first meeting last Friday. We had a fringe meeting on Sunday. We have National Assembly events that will come up. We have a consultation toolkit in the making. We will have many events and ways that you can contribute. We're all ably supported by the wonderful Julie Hepburn, who is providing the Secretariat to the Commission. So, conference, we have to produce recommendations by the spring, so that is a big ask in short order, and we will get on with the job. But let me leave you with this message. What we're working for here in the Commission and what we've set our sights out is really about our future. We need to persuade more of our fellow citizens about the benefits of independence, so that when we get our next independence referendum, they will vote for it because they know that is the way to build a fair, successful, prosperous, socially just Scotland. And I hope you'll all help us do that. Thank you very much.
Shona Robison, Conference. Now, I have a wee housekeeping note from my friend Kirsten here, which is lunchtime is coming up, and when you go to lunch, will you all please take your bags and your coats and everything else with you, because you can't keep them on the chair to book your place for the afternoon. It's not the beach. So please take your towels and anything else that you have with you off for lunch, and the security people are happier. But it's not lunchtime yet, for those of you who thought that was the cue to rush for the Sannies, because we have a fantastic final speaker. Our final speaker has an extraordinary CV: Royal Marine, council leader, Skye Bridge protester, government minister, and now the SNP deputy leader. Conference, please welcome Keith Brown.
Thanks very much, John. Thanks very much, Conference. And just as John said previously that Laura would do her bit to reduce Scottish Tory numbers in Scotland, I fully expect that John Nicholson will do his bit to fully reduce numbers in Scotland too. As you've heard already, Conference, it's very clear from the speakers we've heard that Scotland is on a journey that's lasted many, many years, many decades. But it is now getting to the most exciting stage ever. It's clear that independence is not only on the horizon, but looming into view. It's clear also that with the poll this weekend that we've seen, with support for independence at 50%, and support for Scotland taking Scotland's future into its own hand, that support is growing further. Now, friends, I remember the referendum on the night in 2014. I was at the count in Clackmannanshire Council in my constituency. Just as we were the first to announce in 1997 when Scotland voted to reinstate its parliament, in that event in 2014 the vote was 54% no, 46% yes. Now on that night there were many tears. My oldest son had fought in his first ever campaign, immediately burst into tears on hearing the result, as did many others. And then we had to watch the Labour and Tory parties, jubilant, hugging each other, absolutely delighted with the outcome. They looked very much better together. As you know, in my constituency there are two parts to it, Clackmannanshire and Dunblane. Now in Clackmannanshire, two parts in particular, Dollar and Muckert, were the strongest no-voting parts of that council area. But during the recent European elections, we saw some incredible changes taking place of people that had previously been supporting the no side, who felt appalled by the way that Brexit was being carried out, who felt disgusted that their children very often were going to be denied the opportunities that membership of the European Union brings. And we saw a real shift. People that had never considered voting for the SNP or independence before now moving across. And that, I think, is the absolutely key thing we have to be aware of. That we are on the cusp of moving people that have previously voted no to come across to yes. Now, there is no way to an independent Scotland without convincing people that previously voted no to voting yes. But it struck me that with that change that we've seen, not just in Dollar and Muckert in the Clackmannanshire part of my constituency, but also in Dunblane, with that change taking place and with the poll ratings, what I'm looking forward to is for the next referendum when Clackmannanshire stands and declares that Scotland has once again won her independence. Now, we know that a majority of the Scottish Parliament supports independence, and there's been much discussion about Section 30 orders and Plan Bs and so on. Just to be absolutely clear, we are not seeking permission for a referendum. We are seeking agreement for a referendum. And the reason that we're doing that is not to please London, Westminster, however you want to term it. It's because we want to have a fair, clear choice for the people of Scotland, and one that's respected in Scotland by both sides, one that's respected in London, and one that's respected internationally. That's why we have to have the gold standard of a very clear referendum. But I have to say, we also have to be absolutely clear that Scotland will not accept a Westminster veto on Scotland's right to choose. In recent weeks, friends, we've seen hundreds of thousands of people taking to the streets, making clear that Scotland's voice will be heard. And while Westminster politics is well and truly broken, more and more people are convinced that Scotland should take the opportunity to become an independent country. We have the mandate, we have the momentum, and we can win that majority for independence. And the party membership, as we can see from this week's conference, is motivated and raring to go. And it's that energy and enthusiasm that I can feel in the air at this conference, and this drive which I think we all feel to seek a better future for our nation, which means, and I am certain of this, and you can actually tangibly feel it now, that Scotland will soon take its place as an independent country. And our people in this movement and our people in Scotland are our greatest asset. And we shouldn't be under any doubt that the job of taking the nation on that journey lies with us and with our friends in the Yes movement, and that we have the passion and the drive to see it through. And friends, the task of ensuring that we allow people the opportunity to make that choice has never been more important. We are living in times when the vision of Scotland as a successful, independent country offers people hope. I talked about the people in Dollar and Muckert, absolutely scunnered with Brexit and what it means for Scotland. Absolutely scunnered that in many cases, having voted no and told that the only way to secure Scotland's place in the EU was to vote no, they are now being forced to have been dragged out of the EU against their will. And they see the UK government and the Westminster parties as having brought only despair. And set in the context of the uncertainty and the unrest of a dysfunctional Brexit government at Westminster, now more than ever, it's essential that we provide the opportunity and we provide the arguments and the reassurance that Scotland can choose a better, fairer and more prosperous future, a future where we make our own choices and determine our own path. Now, you may have heard some arguments about the financial situation yesterday. It's worth noting that the recent report by the Institute for Fiscal Studies said the UK is now £1.8 trillion in debt. That's around double the debt that the Tories inherited back in 2010. They also said that borrowing would have to rise by £100 billion, that we had already spent in the UK £66 billion because of the Brexit vote. Now, you will have heard from Derek Mackay yesterday, and it's especially underlined by the fact that our pensioners are being told they might have to wait until they're 75 to get one of the worst pensions in Europe. The simple truth is clear: Scotland cannot afford to stay part of this union. So, legislation published by the Scottish Government is paving the way for that new referendum on Scottish independence by setting out the rules for any future referendum held by the Scottish Parliament, such as who is eligible to vote and how campaigns will be regulated. And I fervently hope that the topical resolution passed previously, or rather the arguments for that topical resolution, that we do not have the voter suppression initiatives being offered by the UK government. We want to have the maximum possible turnout and eligibility to vote. But this move to have the referendum regulations set down is a very important step by the Scottish Government, laying the groundwork and paving the way to a referendum in this parliamentary term, and that is legal and constitutional. So it's our responsibility within the party to be ready for that, and the party is in great shape. We should have a spring in our step. We've just had our best ever European election result. Opinion polls showing growing leads for the SNP both at Holyrood and at Westminster. And friends, this is a very good position to be in. And we should be buoyed by that prospect, not least the fact that we're in that position after 12 years, not just of being in government, but being in government during a time of austerity under the UK government. That's a fantastic achievement in its own right. But having said all that, we can take nothing for granted. There is work to do, and we have a great challenge ahead of us. It's here that the hard work begins, and it's not easy to say that to the face of Margaret Ferrier, let's be honest. But however hard we've worked up to this point, this is where it gets really tough. With you in all of your branches, we need to get out there, we need to be chapping doors, we need to make the case and build support for the cause. And I think almost everybody in this conference will have stories of people we know that voted no in 2014, who would, given the opportunity, vote yes now. And it's people like that that we have to reach. People out there who are currently making a journey in their political opinions and reassessing the nation's future prospects. And they are growing in number. When faced with the current appalling government at Westminster and its race towards the Brexit cliff edge, they're looking for something different, something better, and they're looking for a choice. They're looking for a way to escape Boris's broken Britain, and they're ready to hear the case for independence, and it's our job to listen, and listen is the most important thing we can do. I was elected in the by-election in 1996. I won it by 4 votes. Now, we had many people opposed both to me and the SNP, and over the 20-plus years since that time, Even my political opponents, when they've required help or wanted to discuss something, have found that I've been willing to listen. Now, at the last election, I had a majority of nearly 7,000. Listening to people is really important. And don't think that you have to win the argument there and then on the doorstep. People think about what you said after you've left. And if you've been shown a willingness to listen, to respect their point of views, where they have concerns, to listen to and try and address those concerns, that makes an impression on people, especially, as is often the case, we are the only party to have turned up on their door. It's really important to listen and listen respectfully. And think about the nature of the people that we have to convince. It's not those of us that are already convinced. We know in many cases we can put that argument to them very effectively. We know we have their support. We have to convince others who have been more reluctant to come across. And the reason we have to do that is because we don't win independence without these. So if you think very carefully about the approach that we take, then I'm sure we can get further support for independence. We have to provide the reasons and the context for people to make that choice. We have to persuade them with patience and understanding and with open arms. There's no point in saying you got it wrong in 2014, you were wrong about this, you were wrong about this. We have to make sure they find it as easy as possible to come on board with our arguments. And to do that, we have to get out there and speak to our friends, our neighbours, our colleagues and our families and build the case in that reasonable and consensual manner. This conference is a key to building further support for independence. The march in Edinburgh just weeks ago demonstrates the enormous groundswell of support for our movement. And with people stretching as far as the eye could see, it was some sight to behold. And can I say, we should never be too proud to march. I have to say I've done a few marches in my time, and some of them have been easier than other ones. It's much easier without a pack on your back, for example. But the marches that we've had in the last year or so are absolutely joyous occasions. There's never been any trouble at them. There are people that want to come and take part, and so they should. Even people that are still a little bit uncertain come along to those marches to see what it's about and then become convinced by the arguments they hear at the marches. And there is nothing more effective conference than talking to people and taking them on that journey from no to yes. We also, of course, look forward to a Westminster election campaign, and it's clear that the work has to start now where it's not started already. And front and centre of that campaign will be to offer the Scottish people an alternative to the current chaos at Westminster and the looming disaster, the potential looming disaster of a no-deal Brexit, to offer people a choice for something different. And as we leave later on today, after having heard our leader, Nicola Sturgeon, and we return to our branches and get on with the job of campaigning for the coming election, we should take with us that great sense of optimism and understand the fact that every election that we have to stand in is one where we try and convince people about independence and not just to make sure we get a vote at that election. So we have to be the people that show that optimism for what Scotland can be. And we have to show the optimism for the campaign ahead of us for the future of Scotland and to look forward to joining that European family of nations as an equal and independent partner. And to be a nation that, once we get there, looks to, encourages, helps and defends other nations like Catalonia to help join us in that family of nations. So it's been 35 years for me, and it's been many years for many people here, but I'm just as excited as ever to go out and make that case for our country's future, giving voters in Scotland the chance to shape that better future for Scotland. This is the chance that we have. We are closer now than we've ever been. It's been my view that since before the last referendum in 2014, we have been in the process of becoming independent. It's there within our grasp. I think many people, especially those that have been on this path for a long time, sense it, they can feel it, they can touch it. This is our time, conference. Let's grab the opportunity with both hands. Thank you.